Good
Blog
morning.
Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. You're listening to Venus Unplugged. And what we do here is we explore all realms of Venusian energy, whether it be the archetype, whether it be love in our life. We look at myths and all the symbolic languages of dream. And, of course, Uncle Jung, Carl Jung, big on that one. So what I'm going to be looking at today is persona. Last week we explored Saturn and the laws of karma and trying to kind of tease out the depth of what that really means. And it's easy to say, what goes around comes around, but it's much more complex than that. So the persona, or in astrology, what people would say the rising sign, that's the mask we develop to cope with life. Now, we can we get this developmental stage from our environment. We're watching, we're seeing what works. We're observing, how does mama and papa or siblings, or how do they deal with issues and problems? Or how do they design their life? Do they lie? Do they make up stories? It's very important, and particularly in relationships, because there can be such a drastic difference in one's persona and one's truth, who they really are. And it can get very confusing. Somebody could have an extremely charming mask and persona, and there's a rotten person underneath, or manipulative. So it's the presenting self, and this is part of kind of how we get along in the world, or how we develop in the world. But it can be very, very different from the ego, and very different from the motivations of the ego. So the persona is the mask that helps us face the outer world. So we're looking. So if we're born on a sunny island that, here comes a total fantasy that is totally peaceful and joyful, and, I suppose there's somewhere in the world where that exists. You're gonna expect, like Tahiti was, 150 years ago, innocent and beautiful and somewhat of a paradise. So that's what the people would develop from that environment. Just a sense of peace, kind of more shamanistic, going with the flow. The American Indian, working with their rituals that take hours and hours to work out, is a very beautiful and systematic and ancient way of motivating, of dancing out the shadow, of working, of, that's part of, and also how they present themselves into the world, and whether it's the warrior whose persona we have to come off as, or the hard ass, or the businessman, and a lot of fashion and clothing and the way we dress has to do with kind of the get up, our supreme get up to get out in the world. Or you can be totally tricked. To have somebody walking around as if impoverished and schlubbing along, and they've got millions of dollars stashed away somewhere. So persona is what we try to do, of course, is to have the persona that we're aware of, because a lot of times people believe their persona. It's like, I'm so beautiful. It's like, well, on good days, but not everybody is beautiful every day, and we have different standards for what that is. But they have this presenting persona, and sometimes it could be a little bit of like, wow, get that out of my face. That's not what you value. You may value intelligence, or you may value sports, whatever it might be. So the persona can charm people or can turn people off. But where do we get it from? So the word persona means, it's Latin for the word of an actor's mask. and its original function was to signify the role played by the actor. And the very word continues to, in a certain way, to suggest putting on an act or playing to the gallery, that is, or appearing something which is just not what we really are. Or somebody can be what they call, a street angel and a house devil, right? They are so charming. What a nice person. And they want to be a serial killer. That's definitely persona. Or the second they get, home, they kick the dog and they're miserable. Or vice versa. They're absolutely doll babies at home, and then at work they're like just mean and bullying. So these are the personas that we can switch on and off to a degree, but it's dangerous if we don't. Well, it's certainly dangerous if we're wearing the wrong persona or an inappropriate persona, when we should be dialing down. Like, don't be taking a nasty ass attitude with a group of hostile people. That is bad form and a little on the dumb side. You may be thinking you're a superhero or heroine, but you ain't. So, being able to understand how we're playing into the world, what we're becoming. And then, of course, you can have a certain persona, and then people, according to how they understand that persona, are going to stereotype you. Okay, now a stereotype is an archetype that has lost its soul. Got it? A stereotype is an archetype that has lost its soul. So all we get is this empty kind of cotton candy, dumbass. It doesn't really have any essence in it. It's just typical. There's nothing happening. No sound down, no music, no action, no soul. But that's when people are totally identified with a persona that just doesn't work. Or they develop a persona, in their teenage years, and that's not working at middle age or deathbed. So we need to be aware, certainly, of our own personas, and certainly of the personas of others and what's really going on. Now, most people in the day-to-day world do not have time to reflect that, I wonder who that person really is. So we kind of take it at face value. But then, when you get to know someone and you realize, that wise ass is actually a very sweet soul that uses wise assness to get along and to get some distance. Or the person who's, the clown. Or, the other, there's a real dangerous one. It's the one who's like, only wants positive thinking. Sometimes positive thinking can be hazardous to your health. Because you're communicating with somebody and you're presenting as positive, right? But nothing else is vibing that way. So the person isn't going to trust you, or they're going to get turned off, or your positive thinking is going to be like, just sliding down the wall because it's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't match. So people aren't going to believe you, even though you swear, it's the right thing to do. So we learn how to develop these masks. First, from the environment. We observe what everybody else is doing, and we obviously observe the physical environment we're in. So it kind of forms naturally in childhood. And sometimes it's difficult to see their persona. They believe it because, that's the way I've always am. But they don't realize that that to see the persona is to become aware also of their shadow or the anima or animus. Now, a little note here, which is good to remember. Same sex, can trigger one another's shadow. Opposite sex are unconsciously working with anima and animus. So when two women get into an argument or a disagreement, or they're going to bring up one another's shadow unwittingly, and that's why there can be such a bombastic reaction. So if someone who just disagrees, all hell can break loose. Or people will say, when one woman with other women, they just say, I just have a really hard time with women. They're smelling the shadow. And so I don't want to deal with that shit. Just like in the dream. If we dream of women in a dream and we're women, some is shadow material. Now, the shadow isn't negative or positive. It's the shadow. It's what we don't know. There can be wonderful gifts and abilities, in the shadow, but we don't want to look at it. Well, believe me, your enemy will find it fast enough, which is the kind of cool thing about having enemies, because it will bring up, when there's an intense reaction, when someone just says, hey, man, that wasn't cool, you really disappointed me there. And you go berserk, and it wasn't kind of brought on you, that's your shadow response. So somewhere there's shame, or somewhere there's a little bit of truth, and you're not in the mood to look at yourself. And, middle age starts at between 35 and 40-ish, right? So the first part of life is like we're getting it together, the ego and what we think the world is about and what we're going to do, and we're going to get married, we're going to have children, we're going to, it's lasts a little longer now, but pretty much by 35 to 40, you may start to notice life is not happening according to the dial you think you're on. And there needs to be changes. Now, if we can't shift this mask that we're wearing, or we're not aware that it's a mask, or that it doesn't work, or the person who plays a little girl victim, meanwhile, they're power-driven, and they start all sorts of shit. Oh, how could I do that? This always happens to me. Well, something keeps on happening to you. Guess what the common denominator is? You. If your relationships aren't working, in a lot of the time, you're the common denominator. So you need to look at, wow, am I picking the wrong friends? If I need sensitive and creative friends and, you're doing ice hockey, well, maybe after the game, if anybody's still alive, that can work. But so we need to understand that we can bring forth, we can command a stage by the masks that we wear, the way we develop. It can help us in the world, or it can be very disturbing. Let's say somebody is born into who really is a very delicate or sensitive soul, and they're born into the South Bronx. You're going to have a very different persona than what you actually feel, which can make you feel pretty crazy, because it's like, whoa, this environment does not match my nature, but I better get some tricks in my little bag of tricks to survive this. So you can either get tough when, that's really not who you are, or funny. You can deflect through wearing, the mask of the clown. Or let's say, and then around teenage years, you could see kids, they start to try on their persona. I mean, I love it, with the outfits and the colored hair and everything that's going on. It's just so, and every generation has their particular form of uniform, because they're all wearing it, and it's amazing how it reflects. Most of them don't stay that way, but that's them trying on different personas, different masks, what works, who am I? And that's what they have to go hang with the friends, mostly because the friends are pretty much going through the same thing, and they don't know who they are, and they don't want to be who you want them to be most of the time. or they'll just agree with you while they're at home and then get out in the street and go wild. And it can be a very crazy wild and a creative wild. So wild isn't, or dangerously wild, where they actually learn to think on their own, or they realize, like, wow, I am so different than Ma and Pa or whomever. And they can have several kind of rainbow persona where we can use in different ways. So some people want to be, a gentleman, perfectly well-mannered. But then they're stealing all sorts of stuff. So in looking at the persona, you don't always believe what you get. If you're working with somebody, you fall in love with somebody, and it's not matching, how they develop their persona, which they may not be aware of, is going to make you very uncomfortable. I remember years ago, a politician came several times, and then finally one day I just said, because he couldn't understand why people didn't vote for him. And I was like looking at him completely puzzled. And of course, a la Llorraine style, I said, well, they don't vote for you because you're nasty. And he said, what? I said, you come off as nasty. He said, you're kidding. I said, nobody's ever told you that? And you want to be in public service? You got to up your game because, you don't, if you don't realize. I said, well, they were too afraid because he really wasn't a nasty person. He just thought he was being efficient or had a really bad sense of humor, which doesn't go over so well in any world. So that was his persona. And he really was born to be a politician, meaning the pole star. That's where the word politician comes from. It's the shaman or the leader of the tribe who follows the northern star, the pole star, brings the tribe into the culture and moves along. Okay, so we're very far away from that one these days, but that's what it means. So a person could be a politician by nature. That doesn't mean they're going to go into government office or someone will act very much like a lady, right? And meanwhile, they're just rotten and mean and snobby and cruel. But they present well. So part of being able to understand how does this persona work. So it's a mask towards ourselves as much as it's as others. So people can think they're holier than thou. Meanwhile, they're just possessed by the negative animus, and it's all opinion. Somebody else's opinion, not even their opinion. So that's when it's not matching. So it's not the whole person, and we think that's the whole person. And when you get to know somebody and you love them for them, a lot of times that personality stuff, persona stuff, we just kind of put aside and go like, well, that's how they act, when they get out in public, all right? Or that's how they act when they get nervous. So when people are with a deficient persona, they're at a great disadvantage in adult life. They have no shield against the projection of others and are in constant danger of falling back into the original state of what they call participation mystique with their environment. It's collusion. You become part of something, but it's not truly who you are. So of course, the wearing of the mask does have to do with the god Dionysus. So Dionysus, is the god of carnivals and masquerades and the patron saint of actors. It's also the mask god and with children, like when they're playing. It's not the mask god of children. It's the masked god, period. Now with children, when they're playing, we need to understand that they're wearing a mask. So they don't always realize play is real. It's not a lie. It's play. And the mask they're wearing in play is real. Now, if a child can't tell the difference, which is they go through that stage where you need to help them, it's like, okay, so in this side of reality, that would be considered a lie because it's not related to this side of reality. But on the play side of reality, it's totally cool. You're fine. So we each have our own kind of day-to-day closeness to just observing personas, and let's say that we're around children a lot. But what adults will do to hide grief is they'll play cool. Everything's beautiful, everything's lovely, as the house is being taken from you, or there's no food in the refrigerator. And so the children look at that, and they put on their mask according to that. So it becomes certainly an internal nightmare, because how could you be smiling when the wolf is at the door? So, or the parents will be playing, house, and everything will be lovely, and there's no problems. But meanwhile, they're fretting, or they're fighting, or they're whatever they're doing. So, the parent who pretends that everything is peaceful in spite of the pain and turmoil that they're experiencing is playing with the child head, who in turn guides him and feeds him lines. So the child says, oh, in distress, you act happy. That's what I saw. But in the unconscious, there's chaos and going on, or staying in a really destructive or bad marriage for the children. That's your lie. The children know something's off, and so they, in turn, will stay in destructive and heart-wrenching relationships, and never think, I either got to change this or get away from this. So when the children are playing, so are the parents playing, or the siblings are playing. If they make believe that everything is going well, so we're not going to ask them because they don't know. I'm talking about with children. A lot of adults don't know either, for that matter. If we ask them if when they're playing, is that true? Honest truth and honest play. They're playing, and it's doing them both a lot of good. Games only become false when we take them literally, when we call them reality. That is, when we want to stop playing and get serious. So, in the everyday world, and that can also help to not be reactionary, to just look and say, oh, that's the role that person plays. I don't buy it, but that's the role that they need, as long as it's not destructive to you. And they could step back, because you can feel that. So people can be roaring like lions, but meanwhile they're quivering like little mice inside. It's very confusing, and you can walk away confused, like maybe I'm the one quivering. It's like, no, you picked up both. And as I said, we need this mask, or several of them, to deal with the external environment, and also to be the go-between the shadow and the ego and the persona. So we begin to protect. Now, once again, the shadow is neither negative nor positive. It's just the parts of us that we don't know about ourselves. It usually comes out in a shock. Some event happens in our life and we're surprised or hurt, because what gets hurt? Our ego gets hurt. Our persona gets bruised, but our shadow gets free. So when there's this strong reaction of, let's say, rage, inappropriate rage, it's like, come on, the person just said you failed them. You've got to look at your shadow, Because that person actually did you a favor. It pushed a shadow button. You didn't know you were walking around, or you thought you could handle all that rage instead of working with it in through therapy or philosophy or art. Because all that caught up energy turns into rage. We just don't know what to do with it. So when we, once again, back into the psychological approach of positive thinking, it's built around, fundamental prescription to replace the negative roles and fantasies by positive ones. And if we repeat, I'm strong, often enough, and if I act as if I were strong, then I may be becoming strong. And apart from the fact that one cannot build a whole psychology exclusively around positive thinking as a singular inner experience, because there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. It's like a kaleidoscope within, right? So, and we can't just use one archetype. We use them all to some degree. So that one-stop shopping or that one answer, we're not going to be growing. We're going to be repressing, and life itself is going to have to set you up, whether you like it or not. So when we begin to realize, of course we want to be positive. Why wouldn't we be? We can say, well, on the positive side, I can perceive it this way, and on the not-so-positive side, I can see its opposite, and I'm somewhere between those two, and I'm going to work on this and see how this works. Or to shut somebody off who's in pain and say, oh, well, there's a silver lining. There may not be. That's not a given. We believe that here, particularly in America, but that's not necessarily true in any other parts of the world. So, and let's say if we act untroubled while we're feeling panicked, people may perceive you as a liar. Because why aren't you dealing with it? So, that's what we have to start looking at. People don't realize that it's perceived as a lie because their mask and their inner world is not matching. And if you're sensitive to them, or just, sensitive in general, it's not going to fly. But we need to be careful. Genuine emotions, the real deal, are part of who we are as human beings. But if we cover them up and then say nobody knows me or nobody loves me, that's because nobody has ever seen, or you have not expressed, or if you have expressed, I've seen this happen a lot, people do express very clearly, and the other person doesn't want to hear it. They want you to wear that mask for them. You will play this role in my life or else. Well, then you got to rethink it. So here's to the ode of the persona and the mask, and where you're well and have many, but try to have them aligned with the true feelings of what's going on, because that's what makes us human, and that's what we're here for, to become human. Okay, bye-bye.
Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.